Some of the most incredible stories of heroism don't come from the front lines. Not always. Sometimes they come from the kitchens or the laundry rooms, places that are designed to sustain a fighting force, not lead it. So today, we're going to dive into those moments when military cooks, in the face of absolute chaos, dropped their ladles and took command.
So picture this. It's a quiet Sunday morning at Pearl Harbor. Aboard the battleship USS West Virginia, mess attendant Doris Miller is just collecting laundry. It's about as routine and non-combat as it gets, pretty much as far from the ship's guns as you can be. And then, in an instant, the world just explodes. The surprise attack is on, and his battleship is right in the crosshairs.
And that really gets to the heart of what we're talking about today. In the absolute chaos of battle, when the chain of command is shattered and the trained fighters are down, who steps up? What happens when the very people trained to feed the fight are suddenly forced to lead it?
To get to the bottom of that, we have to realize something. Heroes are almost never the people we expect. They often pop up from the very roles we tend to overlook, in moments that demand something way, way beyond their job description. To really get a handle on these stories, let's use a little framework. We'll call it the inversion of duty. It's that critical moment, that flashpoint, when support personnel, we're talking cooks, clerks, medics, are forced by pure chaos to take over tactical command. It's like their job descriptions are flipped completely upside down right on the spot. They go from just supporting the battle to actually directing it.
All right, so our first case study is probably the most famous example of this duty inversion. We're talking about Mess Attendant Second Class Doris Miller, a man whose actions that day would challenge the entire structure of the U.S. Navy.
I mean, just look at the massive gap between what was expected of him and what he actually did. In the segregated Navy of 1941, black sailors were funneled exclusively into service roles. They cooked, they cleaned, and here's the crucial part. They were explicitly forbidden from any weapons training. So when crisis hit, Miller's actions weren't just a change in duties. It was a defiant leap over these huge racial and institutional walls.
His actions were just bam, 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 one after the other. First, with bombs and bullets flying everywhere, he drags his mortally wounded captain to a safer spot. Then, on his own initiative, he sees an unmanned .5 cal machine gun. Remember, zero training. And what does he do? He jumps on it and starts laying down effective fire on Japanese planes until he's completely out of ammo. And even then, as a ship is literally sinking beneath him, he's on deck, pulling other sailors from the burning water.
So for this incredible bravery, you'd think the Medal of Honor would be a sure thing, right? Well, of the 15 Medals of Honor awarded for actions at Pearl Harbor, not a single one went to an African American. And this wasn't some simple oversight. It became a huge controversy.
And this wasn't some minor debate either. The push to get Miller the Medal of Honor went all the way to the top, but the Secretary of the Navy at the time, Frank Knox, who was a known, staunch opponent of integration, he personally blocked it. Instead, he recommended the Navy Cross. Now that's still a very high honor, but it was a deliberate move to avoid putting a black mess attendant on the same heroic pedestal as the nation's white combat heroes.
But here's the thing. Miller's story, as incredible as it is, wasn't a one-off. Just about a month after Pearl Harbor, on the other side of the world, another culinary specialist was about to totally redefine the limits of his role. This is the story of Mess Sergeant Jose Calugas in the Philippines.
1,000 yards. Let that sink in for a second. That's 10 football fields. Now imagine running that distance completely in the open while artillery shells are just raining down all around you. That is exactly what Sergeant Calugas, a mess sergeant whose job was to feed his unit, did on January 16, 1942, during the Battle of Bataan.
And here's the key. Calugas didn't just fire a gun. He took tactical command. He gets to this silenced artillery position, sees the crew is dead or wounded. What does he do? He immediately organizes a volunteer squad from the chaos, directs them on how to get the gun working again, all while under constant fire, and then gets that gun firing back at the enemy. This was pure, unadulterated leadership, executed by a mess sergeant.
And if you think that's the end of his story, you are way off. Calugas' ordeal was just beginning. When Bataan fell, he survived the horrifying death march, then spent nearly 2 years as a prisoner of war. And after he was finally released, he immediately joined a guerrilla unit to keep fighting. It wasn't until 1945 that he was finally awarded the Medal of Honor for what he did back in '42.
Okay, so we've got these two unbelievable stories, cooks who became commanders. But to really get what makes them so significant, we need to compare them. not just to each other, but to see where they fit in the broader history of this kind of battlefield promotion.
So let's break this down. We have Kalugas, the mess sergeant who organized an entire crew, and Miller, the mess attendant who manned a heavy machine gun. But now let's throw a third person into the mix for context, John Cook, a 15-year-old bugler from the Civil War. He also earned a Medal of Honor for taking over a cannon at Antietam when its crew was killed. Now, Cook's actions were absolutely heroic, no question. But here's the difference. His role as a bugler was already part of the battlefield's command structure. He was already in the fight, so to speak.
And that right there is what makes the stories of Kalugas and Miller so profound. The leap they made was so much bigger than just swapping roles. They were shattering deep institutional and racial barriers. Their jobs were designed to keep them segregated away from combat. So for them to take command wasn't just heroic, it was a defiant act against the very system meant to hold them back.
So what happened after the smoke cleared? Well, the impact of what these men did, it didn't just stop when the fighting stopped. They sent ripples through the military and through society that we can still feel today. Think about this. After the war, Jose Kalugas, the former mess sergeant, was given a direct commission as an officer, and he eventually retired as a captain. The system finally recognized his leadership. Endorsed Miller's heroism? It became a powerful rallying cry for civil rights and a key argument for desegregating the armed forces. And today, get this, a VA medical center and a nuclear-powered aircraft carrier bear his name. An aircraft carrier. That's an honor usually reserved for presidents.
You know, Miller himself seemed to get just how big his actions were. In a rare letter, he wrote this: "It's not a boastful claim at all. It's just a quiet, hopeful acknowledgement that maybe, just maybe, he'd cracked open a door for the people who'd come after him."
And that fight, it's not over. All these decades later, the effort to fully recognize Doris Miller's valor is still ongoing. There are bills being introduced in Congress even today to try and right what many see as a historical wrong and posthumously award him the Medal of Honor he was denied back in 1942.
So in the end, we know what it takes to make a hero. A moment of unimaginable crisis and a person of incredible, unbelievable courage. But the stories of Doris Miller and Jose Kalugas, they force us to ask a much, much harder question. What does it take for a nation to truly and justly recognize one?